Intellectual origins of the Declaration of Independence. Thomas Jefferson didn't just sit down one night in June of 1776 and come up with the ideas for the Declaration of Independence right then and there. A committee consisting of John Adams and Ben Franklin and some others sat down before Jefferson ever put pen to paper and discussed how the document would be organized and what arguments they would implement. But these ideas, too, did not just come from the minds of Adams, Jefferson, and Franklin. They didn't even come from the years immediately preceding the Revolution. The story of where this starts begins long before the Revolution, long before the French and Indian War, which planted the seeds of the American Revolution. With roots going back as far as ancient Greece, the main crucible of events which gave rise to the arguments that eventually became the Declaration of Independence began in the mid-1600s England. From about 1625 to 1690, England entered an unstable period that gave birth to two major political philosophers. To give a really quick overview of this period of time, King Charles I of England was unpopular for his anti-Protestant stances in England and for his trying to force absolute power over the English Parliament. This led to a civil war in England, which ended with Charles losing his head and Parliament under Puritan influence ruling in England. This period of time, known as the English Commonwealth, saw tyrannical control under Puritan Oliver Cromwell and later his son. The Commonwealth ended in failure in 1660, and the son of Charles I, Charles II, was invited by Parliament to restore the British monarchy. Charles II restored the monarchy, but he and his successor and brother, James II, were also unpopular with the people and Parliament. James II's reign ended in the Glorious Revolution, also called the Bloodless Revolution, in 1689, when Parliament offered the throne to James's daughter, Mary, and her husband, William of Orange. This period ended with principles that law and Parliament, not the king, were the final powers in England, which was finally stated in the English Bill of Rights shortly after William and Mary took power. Out of this unstable period came two important philosophers, Thomas Hobbes and John Locke. We'll start with Hobbes. Hobbes was... No, wait, not that Hobbes. That Hobbes. Okay, much better. Thomas Hobbes lived through the English Civil War that resulted in the military dictatorship that was the Commonwealth. He saw lots of bloodshed and suffering during the war and decided to write a book explaining why people should follow the king without question. This book was called Leviathan. To do this, he created a thought experiment called the state of nature. We'll discuss it in more detail in a few moments, but the quick version is that what were people like before government when they were in the state of nature? In other words, what are people like when there is no one telling them what to do? Hobbes had a very low opinion of humanity and said that in the state of nature, the life of man is solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. Hobbes believed that in the state of nature, when people were left to their own devices, people are inherently evil and stupid. That without society, they are nothing but barbarians who will steal, rape, and murder to get what they want. There is no cooperation, no compassion, no charity. In Hobbes' vision of the state of nature, all people are at each other's throats constantly. To Hobbes, the state of nature is war of all against all. Hobbes argues in Leviathan that the only way to keep people from destroying each other is through what he calls the social contract. To Hobbes, the social contract is an agreement by everyone to obey the rules of a society so long as it protects them from each other by creating a government. Hobbes goes a step further and states that the only form of government that works is that of an absolute monarchy, where the king has complete and total and absolute power and cannot be questioned or challenged. Remember, Hobbes set out to justify King Charles I's reign. He argued that people are born into royalty because God chose them to be king, and thus anything a monarch does has the approval of God. To question the king is to question God, in Hobbes' argument. This is called the divine right of kings. This is shown quite well in the famous first page of Leviathan. You will notice that in the original image on the front page of Leviathan, which is almost always reprinted with the book to this day, that the king depicted on the front page has a body which seems to be made up of numerous other smaller people. This metaphor is that the king is the ruler, the brain of society, and that the populace only makes up the body of society, that it cannot nor should not go against its king, the head of the body. Within this argument for the divine right of the king, Hobbes also argued that the people of any nation must follow the religion of the king. His argument for this stems from the fact that England had been in battles between Catholics and Protestants for nearly 100 bloody years. The reaction against this belief in absolute monarchy is what eventually gave America and Britain its beliefs in freedom of religion. And even though at the time Hobbes lost the battle when the Commonwealth under Parliament took over, he did win out temporarily when the Stuart monarchy was restored after the fall of the Commonwealth. However, about 30 years later, when King Charles II and James II began trying to rule by divine right and cut Parliament out of the process of government, the Glorious Revolution took place.